right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Next Gen HR, Preparing for Tomorrow's Leaders. I'm going to moderate the session, and we have a wonderful panel of guests that I can't wait for you to hear from. To kick off, I'm Sophie. I lead the people team here at Lattice, and I am a millennial. But Sudarshan, I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Sophie. I'm Sudarshan. I head people operations at Nine. I'm a millennial as well. One tidbit, because my manager is in the stage, I didn't give them the title. They promoted me without telling me.
Surprise.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm Senior People and Culture Manager at Rafa. I'm a millennial. And yeah, really looking forward to speaking with everyone.
Hi everyone, my name's Tash. I'm a leader here on the customer care team at Lattice, and I am representing Gen Z.
And I'm Steven, and I have the honor of representing Gen X.
We need representation across everything here. So
I knew I made it in life when I was asked to represent Generation X.
we're just thankful you're here.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I want to kick off, and I've got a few questions for the panel, but we'll also make sure there's time for questions from the audience, because we want to make sure any questions you've got, we can help answer those. But I do have a question to get us started. As Gen Z climbs toward a third of global representation in 2025, it's time to embrace and explore what the next generation of HR can bring to the table. And so with that in mind, the first question I want to ask, I'm going to actually ask Sudarshan to kick this off for us. Gen Z is the first truly digital native generation. How can organizations leverage Gen Z's technological intuition while ensuring other generations aren't left behind in digital transformation initiatives? It's a big question. If you need me to repeat, let me know.
Yeah, no, I'll try to keep my answer a bit bigger, but no. So I think it's a great question, right? And I mean, it depends on how you see it. You can see it as disruption, but the way I see it is natural evolution, right? I think while Gen Z is kind of technology first, it's a symptom of what we're seeing in the world, which is digital transformation. And to some of the sessions we had earlier, it's no longer a question of why, it's a question of how. I think we all need to move the business forward through digital transformation. We all want to get to a place where the people experience is enabled by digital transformation. And the question is, how do we achieve that? And I think what I've seen, or my personal perspective on this, is segmentation and inclusive design is super important, because you need to understand like the different personas. Some of it may be related to kind of the different generations, but when you're looking at tech adoption, a lot of it is just tech literacy and kind of the capability, which is not always just based on age, right? One thing that I remember is a couple of years ago, we kind of implemented ServiceNow. And the reason we did that is to enable a lot of self-service workflows for our employees. Similar kind of problem, which is we saw a lot of like very early adoption in certain groups, but certain groups we didn't. And we felt it was because of kind of the generational gap, right? But when we dived deeper, we kind of understood the problems. What we understood is that it was lack of inclusive design, it was lack of segmentation, because it was built by digital natives for digital natives. So it wasn't solving problems for certain groups of folks. And when we started to kind of fix that by designing workflows that made sense for them, by educating them, by kind of giving them a forum where they could be a part of the solution, we saw a lot of great adoption. So I think segmentation, inclusive design, more important than ever, but I also see it as just kind of the next step.
I love that. I think that's so important, keeping the human at the center of design, right? Human-centered design is probably the most important thing we can do. Let's make sure the technology is serving us, not the other way around.
Just as you were talking, it's interesting the way you framed it, which is it's almost like inclusivity, right? It's making sure everybody has input into how something is being designed, how something is being processed. And in some ways, it's like that's generation agnostic. As businesses, as teams, we should be thinking about that anyway, because it could be about generation, it could be about other things. But so long as we're keeping and staying open-minded and ensuring that not everybody has a say in things per se, but everybody has input, and that input is being considered, then you're able to develop things that are that can be used by a wider group of people.
I'd love to hear a little bit from you, Kat, on this question. Gen Z has grown up with instant feedback in many aspects of their lives. How are you considering adapting performance management and communication practices to meet these expectations while maintaining effectiveness across generations?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's probably super relevant to a lot of people in this room. as a people team, you're always thinking about how you can kind of best design your like practices and processes to really ensure that feedback is in the moment and it's instant. And I think a lot of the time, you know, for us at Rafa, it really like comes from the top. Our CEO is really passionate about sort of vulnerability-based trust is a thing that we talk about a lot. So really creating that culture where not only do we provide kind of whether it's tools or kind of, you know, workshops or whatever it might be for people to understand how to give feedback, we really like practice it as we kind of preach. And yeah, I think some things that like small techniques, I guess, we've used and things we do, we have this kind of culture of like say it in the meeting. So you've got to like be honest, give the feedback in the moment in the meeting. And some people might have heard of things like the kind of rule of 5. So I think we call it fist to 5. So if it's a 5, it means you're fully aligned, you're kind of walking out of the meeting feeling really positive about the decision. But if you're a 4, you're thinking, okay, actually I'm not fully like on board with this. But the key thing is you're kind of delivering that in the meeting as opposed to kind of going outside and talking about it. In a different sphere. And then there's all the kind of feedback tools, I guess, as well that we use. So whether that's like using the engagement survey or using tools in Lattice as well. That's kind of how we manage it at Rafa.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Everybody's looking at me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, just to add, I think like the principle is consistent, right? Which is essentially that like while feedback is something that Gen Z wants, I mean, all the data, all the research shows that like if you give employees consistent feedback, they're more engaged. I think there's this Gallup survey that shows that employees who receive consistent feedback are 3 times more engaged than others. So I think what maybe Gen Z are just prompting us to do is to find ways to do it more organically, find ways to remove the friction. So we saw a lot with AI, you know, how like Lattice, for example, will give you AI-driven summaries. Lattice will kind of prompt you to do certain things. So I think the focus may be more on removing that friction, making it easier for managers. But I think that principle has always been there.
Agree. Feedback is not a new concept, right? Tash, I'd love to ask you a question, get some insights from you as well.
Yeah.
The pandemic normalized remote and hybrid work. How are you designing flexible policies that accommodate Gen Z's preferences while creating equitable and effective experiences for all workforce segments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's something as a leader, who particularly a younger leader, and I have my team across all generations, is something that we think about a lot as a care team and Lattice in general. For those who don't know, Lattice have a very hybrid setup, and we give teams and departments a lot of autonomy to choose the cadence that works well for their team. For instance, in the care team, we have 2 in-office days a month, and we also have 1 social per quarter in person as well. And I think what that's done is it's given people the choice and the autonomy to have intentional connection with the team. So what we noticed is that rather than striving for quantity, we strive for quality of connection. And I think our policies at Lattice embrace that, right? And so as a team, what we've noticed is that when we do meet, we're having really important conversations, meaningful conversations in person, and then have more space, say when we're working from home, to get kind of that admin done and the other bits and bobs we're doing. And I think it's that intentional connection that's really important for policies to embrace. And I don't think that's just Gen Z. I think that's across generation. Like I still choose to go into the office 3 days a week. So does Stephen, Gen X, Gen Z. But it's giving employees the autonomy and the choice that really matters, and then still making room for that intentional connection. I think what's really important when we're thinking about policies that encourage and maintain talent.
I think intentionality is really the key word there. It's not about FaceTime for FaceTime's sake. It's about what are we trying to achieve ultimately when it comes to working styles. And you know, ultimately, and every company is going to be different. It might be you want to increase productivity, or it might be you want to build culture. But whatever that why is, intentionality is the main thing. The second is, I think there's something in between. I know some companies have kind of gone to the extremes of everybody back in the office 5 days a week. Rafa, I know you're maybe 4 or 5 days back in the week. It'd be interesting to hear about that. Some are completely hybrid. But there's something in between and something in the middle where I think that you almost have to remind people of why it's important to be back in the office sometimes. And I think people have forgotten. I think there's something about the pandemic where everybody went away, worked from home, and thought, this is amazing. And that just carried on. And over time, people have forgotten the fact that actually going in added a lot of value. And I think having frameworks in place on top of just saying hybrid, so you say we have the 1 day a month, or we have the 1 day in the office every couple weeks, whatever it might be, at least having some guardrails in place almost force that reminder that actually it's not just about what I remember most recently, but it's forcing me to remember what it was like pre-pandemic when I was coming into the office every day. I think the other is, I think we were talking about this just in terms of preferences and what Gen Z want. If you survey them, I think we have to be careful about what people say they want and what they don't know they need. And again, I think giving that reminder is important, and having those guardrails are important. We're just having so I'm going to keep going if you don't mind. I don't know if Lisa's here. Anyway, we were having a conversation over lunch, and somebody was talking about how they made a big shift to, not a big shift actually, it was complete remote working to 2 days in the office working. And it was bigger than that sounds, because what that meant is that all the people that moved away from the local office had to all of a sudden move their families back closer to within commuting distance. And so it was a big change. But what they found as part of their engagement surveys was pre that announcement and post that announcement, engagement was flat to increasing. And I think, although we didn't talk about this, my hypothesis is that what people realized is actually there was a lot of value being back in the office. And I'm going to add one last thing, which is I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. I think there's a lot of debate around what should be done. But it's kind of, what did Sarah say earlier? She made a phrase, different strokes for different folks, right? Companies are different. Companies are trying to achieve different things. Industries are different. The way work gets done is different for different people. And I think you just have to understand that context before you decide what is right for you and what works well for you. I was having a conversation with an investment banker recently, and he said because of the way they get their work done, he felt like the generation of employees that came into the business during COVID, working from home solely, was almost like a lost generation of workers because they didn't get the enablement, the skilling, the training, the ability to sit by more experienced professionals in the finance world to learn in the same way. And he's seen that over time as well, where that generation of people that came in during that time had a much harder time getting promoted in the later years within their organizations.
Kat, I'd love to hear a little bit about Tash talking about the flexibility, but I do know Rafa is in office 4 days a week, and so I'd love to hear from you a little bit about your perspective on this topic.
Yeah, so I guess we've sort of almost gone a bit against the grain maybe at Rafa, and for anybody, I can't remember if I said before, but for anybody who doesn't know Rafa, we're a cycling apparel business, so we make kind of cycling products, and a lot of that happens in-house. So we have our product engineering team are working physically with product, and we've got even sort of an atelier in our office who make kind of mock-up product. So even sort of during COVID, we had people who still sort of had to go into the office. And what's been really interesting is kind of coming off the back of that, and specifically actually related to Gen Z, I think that has been the population who've been most keen to be back in the office. And I think a lot of that comes from being a very sort of creative business where there's that kind of real power in being together and ideating and creating. So I guess that's maybe if anybody is in a retail business or a business where it's kind of high creativity, we've definitely found that being in person works really well for our teams. And that doesn't mean we don't have flexibility for, I'm kind of very respectful that for some people 4 days a week just doesn't work, But definitely having like more presence has been really positive for us. So, yeah.
I think that's really important to flag. And I think just this intentionality, people want to care about why. If you say, like, come to the office, but don't tell them why, like, I'm sure you've all seen that meme, and it's like, come back for the culture. And then they're like, and here's the culture, and it's like cubes, and it's dark, and there's no one there. You know, like, that's not going to motivate and drive people. It has to be driven by why. And I think that transcends generations. It's really that human making work meaningful piece. Let's go to the next question. As Gen Z begins moving into management roles, what unique leadership qualities do you see emerging?
Yeah, so that was an interesting one for me to think about. When I think about my generation and the kind of experiences we had, I think there were two main aspects that really stuck out to me. Firstly, being communication. People in my generation grew up in a hyper-connected world, whether it's messaging friends, family, even at work, Teams, Slack. There are so many apps to stay connected that I think it will lead us to being really open and transparent leaders who strive to constantly communicate and see the benefits of being open. And so I think that's one aspect. But I think maybe the second aspect, which I think we'll see more as time goes on, is empathy. I think when I was growing up, I was privy to a lot of conversations at home, school, among friends about mental health. And obviously that became more and more evident when the pandemic happened. And I think we have a good understanding as a generation on the impact work can have on your mental health, but equally the impact mental health can have on your work. And I think, therefore, as leaders, we'll really strive to create psychologically safe spaces in the workplace and therefore lean into our empathy. And I hope to see that we will be leaders who are transparent and open, but have that empathetic side that really strive to create a workplace that is safe and happy for all and make work meaningful, which I know is the Lattice slogan, but I think it's really important and something that we recognize is that we don't want just to live to work. And if we're going to work, we want it to be a fun and encouraging space.
Yeah, if I may, I'm going to tell you a story. I call it the Chet story because it's about a gentleman whose nickname was Chet at one of the companies that I worked at. If you don't like the story, the Gen Z folks here can boo me and give me some instant feedback. But so when I first joined the tech space, right, and started working in a culture that was very new to me, the way I worked in the past is I understand my managers, I understand my stakeholders, I try to mimic their styles because that's what I thought good workers do, right? So in my first few months, we were at this all hands, and our director was kind of presenting his roadmap and what he thought that we should do. And this person, Chet, he put up his hand and he said, I'm sorry, I don't think that's going to work, right? And my jaw was on the floor because I thought this guy's getting fired tomorrow morning. So I came out of the meeting and everyone else was normal about it. They were fine. And I actually asked somebody, I said, what's happening? What's going on? And he was like, this is Chet, that's his authentic self. He's transparent, he gives you feedback in your face. And what I learned is our director, who was actually Gen X, he actually appreciated that a lot because he was used to people telling him that what he was saying was right. And in a company that was fast-paced, that was agile, getting that feedback, getting that reality check was super useful to him. And I know Amazon has this story about having a chair for the customer, and then Sarah spoke about having the truth lasso. So he was kind of that person for our director. So in every meeting after that, every kind of project that we were reviewing, he always would think about, or we all would think about what would Chet say, because he was the only person who would kind of give us the other opinion. So now, Chet becomes a leader. He kind of continues that. He's authentic. He's transparent. And I think with Gen Z coming into kind of these leadership roles, you'll see a lot more different types of leaders because they're all going to be their authentic selves, right? And I think us as millennials, Gen X, we kind of mold ourselves into one of these stereotypical roles, let's say. But I think with Gen Z, they're just so much open to kind of being themselves. And I think that'll give us a whole new kind of spread of leaders.
I like that example you gave and this idea of transparency. So I'm reading a book called Good to Great. And for those on my team, I said I've been reading that book for a couple of years now. But I've read just enough to be able to use an example from that book. And one of the examples that Jim Collins, who wrote the author, talks about is basically, the book is about what is it that creates lasting companies. So not companies that are just successful for a period of time and then they kind of lose momentum. It's companies that continue to consistently be successful over the long term. And they surveyed leaders, different leaders of different companies that have sustained progress, companies that were hot at one point and then dropped. And what they found is something that was very common amongst the companies that did really well and then kind of went away or fizzled away was that they often had genius leaders with thousands of helpers. And it's kind of that example of all you're being told is you're right, and you're just saying yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Whereas the companies that sustained performance over time were ones where feedback, transparency, openness was appreciated and accepted and almost embraced. It was less about, let me take orders and go execute on it. It was about, let's have a debate, real hard debates, but be open to different ideas. And so I love that. Like I'm really, if this continues and if the new generation is much more about this idea of transparency and accepting ideas across the company or from other people, I'm really bullish about the future of the world and of business. Having said that, I will say that I think that you also have to be very careful about when you ask for input or when you ask for feedback, you have to, or when you're asked for input, you have to understand what that actually means. Input doesn't necessarily mean, and you have to set this expectation, input doesn't necessarily mean that that will be taken and used and as part of whatever idea is being debated. It will be considered, right? You don't have ultimate decision-making authority, but I think if you can create that environment where input is accepted and there's no fear of people not wanting to feedback. But yeah, I like those examples.
Last question, and then we'll turn it over to the audience because we definitely want to hear from you. Looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what HR practices do you think will be completely transformed by Gen Z's influence? And which traditional elements will remain essential regardless of generational shifts? Kat, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, I think, I think there's so many. I think, like, just to kind of build on the piece of feedback, I think around feedback, I think so much will change with how we kind of manage feedback and also conflict maybe at work, and kind of creating, like you were talking about, Stephen, actually that conflict being really, really positive. Something that we kind of have been speaking quite a lot about at Rafa is this scale of kind of being from sort of personal attack to artificial harmony, and where we kind of want to sit on that, and how you create a culture within your meetings where you're moving away from that place of artificial harmony, but you're sort of not going into the personal attack. And that's been really interesting, because I think it's, as soon as, like you were saying around leaders, as soon as you have leaders who are kind of embracing that and open to changing the culture and having these discussions, I think like the whole workplace can evolve, and that then transcends everything from your kind of policies, how you're managing different processes as a people team. Typical things start to become much more, I guess, just much more open. And it's, I think I've definitely seen that bit of Rafa so far. Yeah.
I can go next. I think like with digital first, right, the expectations are also super high, which is for us, for HR tools, as obviously like the folks here from Lattice really know, the bar is so much higher, because Gen Z no longer look at it as HR tools, they look at it as customer apps, right? It's apps that have to be intuitive, integrated, amazing service. So I think just like being willing to kind of adhere to that benchmark, like setting really high benchmarks, I think that's something that we're all going to have to kind of change.
What questions do you have out there? We've got a few minutes, unless Stephen. Do you want to add anything?
Are you looking at? I thought you were.
Past you at someone else?
Yeah. I was gonna. Let me just try and remember what I was thinking about. I was. I can't remember, but it's the Gen X in me. I can't remember.
What questions does the audience have? I see a hand up over here. Yes.
My name is Alistair. I'm Chief of Staff at Tide. But my question is around digital transformation. Do you think that digital transformation is going to change any employment law in the future? or influence employment law?
No, Alistair's from Tide, so I can't answer because otherwise you'll think I set him up so that I sound smart. It's not that.
Boy,
Well, I think from a non-HR perspective, in my opinion, I think it will. I think digital transformation is fantastic in so many ways, but I think equally when we become more digital, we also have a lot more dangers and a lot more gaps, and even things around AI. I think there will have to be some policies around how people use AI, interface with AI, and so I think I can imagine even in the next couple of years, we'll definitely see some new employment laws surrounding AI and how people interface with that and use that in their jobs and when communicating with each other.
Yeah, and we've already seen, and we've even, as a company, talked about having AI in org charts and holding AI accountable. And so, I mean, there's bound to be some change or regulatory kind of changes that come into play as we progress with AI.
And to be clear, we were pretty torn as a company on that one too. Like, I don't think everyone's going to agree on that, but I do believe there'll be things around like ethical use of AI and like how that comes into practice. And you probably heard earlier today, and a big belief I have is, while I think, and I know you didn't ask specifically just AI, but transformation in general, and AI is top of mind, is, AI really shouldn't be put in the seat of passing judgment. I think that's like a very human thing. And so like we need to still be the driver and make sure we're driving AI, not the other way around. And so hopefully that's the sort of policies I think we'll start to see, making sure it's fair, equitable, and create practices that help grow that. Yeah. Question down here.
Oh, right.
Sorry. We've got Mike's running.
Coming. Some exercise for the day.
Be safe. Those stairs get you.
It is. It's getting higher. There you go.
Hi there. Really interesting sort of points raised and discussed. And of course, us Xers have really screwed things up. So
Oh, no.
the question is, I think for the Gen Zs, especially given the broader context of leadership and what's happening at the moment, where it looks like autocracy is kind of back, in many kind of parts of the world. But also, I think, in terms of organizational leadership, and obviously we've got a big danger with the sort of the alpha generation, I think it is, the ones after the Zs, that they're going to be seeing role models that, quite frankly, really we don't want them to see. Yeah. Okay, so this is a question in terms of the whole kind of, what are Gen Z's thoughts about this? And how can we ensure that leadership is more empowered, it's distributed? You've got genuine kind of, you've got genuine kind of empowerment for people where they can start shaping the future of leadership, because hell, the world's got a lot of problems at the moment. So there's big expectations on the shoulders of Gen Z, essentially.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. And I think it touches on a lot of points that are top of mind. I think the most important thing that leaders can do in this room, and Gen Z future leaders can do, is be the leaders you want to see in the world. And I agree there is a lot of negative space and images in terms of leadership right now. And I think all we can do as leaders and people is strive to be how we want to be treated, treat others how you want to be treated, and be that person to another person. And I think I actually want to touch on something that, and I hope you won't mind me sharing this, but me and Stephen had a one-to-one last week, and I'd had a bad week and I was upset. And what Stephen did as a leader is he met me with vulnerability, and he shared his own story and his own experiences in the workplace to meet me there. And I suppose the biggest thing I'd want to say to the room is that there is 100% strength in vulnerability, and to be able to share that with younger leaders or older leaders or just with your colleagues in general is such a huge thing. And I think we as humans learn a lot by seeing and watching, and Stephen taking the moment to share with me a personal story and connect with me on that human level was extremely transformative as a young leader, as a wake-up call of, okay, this is how I would want to handle this conversation going forward. I'm really fortunate to have Stephen as a leader, someone I can lean on and have those conversations with. But I would challenge everyone in this room to, next time you're in a one-to-one, share a little bit of vulnerability, see what you get back, and try reproduce that more in the workplace. Because I think the closer we are connected and the better we understand ourselves, the better we understand each other.
That's a really great, powerful story, Tash. Yeah. I think we are at time, and I want to be cognizant of that. Thank you all for joining us. And I mean, Sebastian, Kat, Tash, Stephen, thank you. Like, incredibly helpful and insightful takeaways. Thank you all, and appreciate you coming.